Spotlight. The NFL coaching carousel has been spinning. It's been very interesting this cycle. And the Ravens, of course, hiring Jesse Minter as their new head coach. Minter worked under former Ravens coach John Harbaugh in various roles from 2017 to 2020, and then joined Jim Harbaugh as the D coordinator at Michigan before taking the same role with the Chargers in 2024. Speaking of John Harbaugh, he was introduced as the Giants head coach this week, agreeing to a 5-year deal to become the next head coach of the New York Giants. Harbaugh comes to East Rutherford, of course, as alluded to, by way of the Baltimore Ravens, where he was the Ravens head coach for the past 18 years, winning Super Bowl 47. And at one point in time, the Giants had the shot at the #1 overall pick, but that currently belongs to the Las Vegas Raiders, who currently hold that #1 pick for the upcoming draft. And almost every single mock, no matter where you look, has this guy, Fernando Mendoza, going #1 overall to be the quarterback of the future for the Raiders. Getting a look at our very own Mike Renner's latest mock draft, picks 1 through 5 there in the first round, and there it is, Fernando Mendoza going #1 overall as the new quarterback there, coming over from Indiana. So they also need a head coach there in Vegas, and we're taking a look at our head coach tracker. We mentioned Jesse Minter, Jeff Hafley, who was just recently introduced as the new head coach of the Dolphins, Robert Saleh. That era begins with the Tennessee Titans, Kevin Stefanski, the new head coach over in Atlanta, but it's still a lot of question marks for several of these teams, including the Las Vegas Raiders. So let's welcome in our NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. JJ, as mentioned, the Raiders, they had that #1 overall pick, likely taking Fernando Mendoza. They also need a head coach. So what is the latest on that coaching search out in Vegas?
Yeah, they need somebody to coach up Fernando Mendoza, right? And so the odds are, what I am hearing, and the Raiders have interviewed, I think, somewhere close to a dozen folks already. Obviously, some folks have gone on to choose other teams, but they want an offensive guy. They want someone who is going to be able to speak the language of Fernando Mendoza. And perhaps even as importantly, I might say, I don't want to say more importantly, but someone to whom Tom Brady can communicate. And Tom Brady has been involved, heavily involved, even though, of course, he is not local to Las Vegas. I'm told he's going to be more involved. And so you want a head coach, if you're Tom Brady, part owner of this team, leading essentially the football operations of the Raiders, that you can speak to on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. And so you start looking around for names, and the top name that you are going to hear is Davis Webb, passing game coordinator of the Denver Broncos. A few years ago, he was a backup quarterback in the NFL. He's been with the Broncos the past couple of years. He's in the mix for the Buffalo Bills head coaching job, and he will be in the mix here in Las Vegas. So you would go from one of the oldest head coaches, actually the oldest head coach in NFL history in Pete Carroll, to one of the youngest head coaches in NFL history in Davis Webb. Of course, the Broncos still have to play. They can't interview or speak with him until after the Broncos play this week. And so we'll wait to see what happens with those second interviews. But that is one name certainly to keep an eye on.
And of course, the Raiders, one of a handful of teams that do need a head coach, another one being the Buffalo Bills. And that brings us to Philip Rivers, because, man, what a roller coaster it's been, from NFL player to high school football coach to being the starting quarterback of the Colts for a couple games this season. And now he's being interviewed to be the head coach of the Bills. So what more can you tell us about that, JJ?
Yeah, quite a Forrest Gumpian
literally
trajectory, right? Like one second you're coaching Alabama Catholic high school football, and then you're playing the San Francisco 49ers and Seattle Seahawks, and now you might coach Josh Allen. This is incredibly highly unusual in the modern NFL to have someone be so close to potentially being a head coach who has never coached at a college or professional level before. You know, Philip Rivers, everybody loves him. The all shucks. It's a lot of fun. But let's be clear about this. This is not typical. This is not normal what the Buffalo Bills are doing by just simply even interviewing him. I know that it happened with Jeff Saturday as the interim head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Jim Irsay, God rest his soul, he kind of did whatever he wanted to do. And so that was an outlier. Now you have Philip Rivers, 2 weeks removed from a second retirement, potentially being Josh Allen's next head coach. And of course, This is all about Josh Allen in Buffalo. It is all about finding the coach to maximize not just Josh, but of course this Buffalo Bills team. And clearly Terry Pegula, the owner, believes that if you get someone like a Phillip Rivers, that you can get to a Super Bowl. You can get over the hump that Sean McDermott could not in nearly a decade, that you could win a Lombardi, something that this franchise has never done. So a lot of focus on Phillip Rivers right now. Josh Allen involved in those interviews, perhaps more so than any other player that I can remember in recent memory, but a couple other names to just keep an eye on. Brian Daboll, of course, who has already interviewed there, former offensive coordinator. Joe Brady, the current offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. And then lastly, the aforementioned Davis Webb, who happens to be very close friends with Josh Allen.
And you mentioned it, JJ. This is all about, Josh Allen maximizing his potential to get to a Super Bowl, to win a Super Bowl. But when you think of it about whoever is stepping in, how much pressure is there on that new head coach to have success and win immediately? Because you do have Josh Allen as your quarterback, and with that comes these very lofty expectations.
Yeah, I would say that there's probably no person on whom there's more pressure than the next Buffalo Bills head coach, because it is very clear from what ownership has said that they believe that this is a Super Bowl team. So if you don't win a Super Bowl, right, that's the reason they fired their second most successful head coach in franchise history in Sean McDermott, because you're supposed to get there and win. So if you don't get there, and if you get there and don't win, then it has to be labeled a failure. So that's an incredible amount of pressure. There's going to be plenty of guys who go into next season on the hot seat, right? Guys who kept their jobs, maybe even though we would have had them in the mix for potentially losing them. You think of a Todd Bowles with Tampa, for example. No, the most pressure on a coach will be whoever is leading the Buffalo Bills in 2026 by virtue of what ownership has said this week and what they believe this roster can and, more importantly, should be moving forward.
All right, finally, want to get to the Browns coaching search, JJ, because they've only interviewed one minority candidate so far, not compliant with the Rooney Rule. So the fact that they have not followed that rule up until this point, how is that going to further delay this entire process for them?
And not only that, they have interviewed minorities virtually, but they still have not gotten into their building or met in person with someone from a diverse background. And we know that you have to have 2 external minority candidates that you interview in person. They are at 0. Mike McDaniel pulled his name out of the search. They're waiting until after the NFC Championship game to speak with Nate Scheelhaase, an offensive coach with the LA Rams, and they have to wait until after that game anyway to interview him in person. So there has to be one other person, right? At least for them to even be compliant with this Rooney Rule. I wouldn't be surprised if we ultimately see them interview someone from the college ranks, perhaps, in order to ultimately get compliant with this rule. And just one quick thing, because I cover this stuff a whole lot, the Browns, it was a setback for them. But a lot of folks are sort of using this Rooney Rule as a bit of a time measurement device to determine, oh, well, now you can go hire your head coach because you just checked off the old Rooney box. And I hear that a lot across the NFL. And I do want to make clear that while the Browns do appear to be behind in their process, they do very much take seriously Nate Scheelhaase. I will not be surprised if in a week from now, Nate Scheelhaase is the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, not because of his skin color, but because he is the best person for the job in their opinion. So, yeah, they're behind. Other teams are ahead of them. Slightly embarrassing for the Browns, no doubt about it, but they still can get their guy early next week. But it's time to put their foot on the gas a little bit.